Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Zoe Hawkins, and my friend and co-host Joe Wheatley.
Hi, everybody. Good to be with you this week. Today, we're talking to you about maternity coaching. And we're talking to you about it because it's one of the biggest life transitions someone can have in their life. And I wish I had some when I had my children. And so we want to talk about what is it, when do people tend to access it, what are the types of topics that come up. So all things to do with maternity coaching. We know some of you are maternity coaches that listen to us, so we hope that this resonates with you. There may be other people listening to the podcast who've been thinking about it as a specialism. Maybe you haven't trained as a coach and you're thinking this is something that draws you to want to be a coach. So hope there's something in it for all of you.
Mm. I think the place I'm drawn to start here is reflecting on my journey around the time I had my first daughter. And I can remember, well, prior to having children, I was very ambitious, hungry to climb the career ladder. Didn't like taking time off, like even for being sick. I was presenteeism. I was like, yes, I need, need to be present. Like this is the way to be noticed. All of those things, just really, really driven. And then when I had my first daughter, all of that was still alive in me, yet I had all the constraints of not being able to have the same level of. I was conflicted. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I was conflicted because I had this part of me which was hungry, ambitious, thirsty, wanting to do well, wanting to like continue to be the person that I was, but I wasn't that person anymore. So then I've got this new part of me which I didn't even know existed, which desperately wanted to give time to my daughter and really cherish those early years and not miss a single milestone. And I didn't want to put her in childcare for long periods of time. Like I wanted to be there all the time. And those two identities couldn't coexist peacefully. I found my way through it, and here we are in this business today. That became a way to develop the flexibility that I wanted. But I think my point is, I don't think my story is unique in any way. It's like having somehow people say, oh, having a child changes you, and for me, it did, but it also didn't. Like it's not like this other part of me disappeared. It's just meant this new part of me rose up, and I had to find a way to reconcile this new person that had emerged, and it was messy and hard. And maternity coaching at the crux, I think, what a wonderful support. Like even if there's organizations that are listening, it's hard if you haven't gone through an experience like that to really understand the value. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's for some, maybe it's not. But what I'm saying is, for me, that would have been immensely valuable, like hugely valuable, just to be able to find a way to work through the different thoughts, emotions, plans that I was working through on my own, largely just usually late at night when I'm awake with a baby that doesn't sleep. So it comes
Mm.
with so much around it too.
I think with maternity coaching, so what is it? It's supporting somebody at a period in their life where, perhaps it begins before the person has had a child, or welcomed a child and into their family, and perhaps they have maternity coaching afterwards. That can come in different formats. It's such an emotional time that so much is unknown. So you may know you're going to have this transition. Now, some people will have a baby earlier than they expected to have a baby, or they have complications, let's say in their pregnancy, and that's really difficult for them. And you're describing like you may be very ambitious and or just love your job and be really good at your job, and your organization may not be replacing your role while you're going away on maternity leave. And part of you might feel really happy about that because you're like, oh, at least nobody's covering it. But then you might feel, well, is my role not important enough to replace? You may be in a situation where your role, you're going to have somebody covering your role, and you might be involved in that process or you might not. And all of these things can really activate very strong emotions. And some people are like look forward to having a baby and going through labor, and other people are absolutely terrified. And that may be a very new experience for them, because that may not be how they feel about other things in their life. And our brains change when we go through this process. So we emotionally change, we physically change. So a lot of things can come up around our identity. Who are we? Who are we becoming? And you were touching upon that. So when you were talking there, and then there's that bit, afterwards, and you're thinking about coming back to work. And I remember worrying that I wouldn't be as good as I thought I was before I had my child. And when you're spending a lot of time with a baby, you're out of the routine, you're not having the same sorts of conversations day in, day out. It's almost like that muscle of the brain. I was worried that it was becoming slack. And and your priorities do change. There is a reality piece to that as well. And trying to figure out and kind of build your confidence back up, really. And organizations have keeping in touch days, and some people will take those up and some people won't. But it's almost like going back into even just a room full of people when you've been on maternity leave and you've been on your own for most of the time, like with a baby, trying to figure out, and you're like, how have I gone from, being in however many different meetings, talking about all these different things, having all this knowledge, to now, I might manage to have a shower. And if we manage to go out and we've got food, that's good. That's successful. And then to the thought of going back into your role where there are different expectations of you, it can be quite overwhelming initially. So having a private space with a coach to be able to be truly honest about how you feel and not have to mask can be so, so important and valuable.
And maybe you're listening to this as a line manager of a team, and maybe you're not a parent, haven't been through motherhood or whatever it might be. And you're listening to it and it's like, oh, it sounds a really nice thing to do. What is the benefit of coaching? And I think it's a great question to ask, because it's nice to be supportive and it's nice to give space for these things. But what actually would the organization or the team or the line manager kind of experience as a result of maternity coaching? And I think really what we're talking about is, a few things. I think there's like a runway to effectiveness. If you throw somebody back in or somebody comes back in, an organization will have changed. Most people will take 6 months to a year. And in that time, that organization would have massively changed. You won't see it because you'll have been in it, like with all the incremental changes that happen. So there is a piece which is that person has to adjust and get back up to speed very quickly. There's also the relationships, as Joe said, like changes you as a person. So some relationships that perhaps were really close before may not have been close. And so there's that motivation and engagement that comes from feeling a sense of belonging and a sense of like, I am where I really need to be. Then there's that internal piece of like, no, I can do this. And I think when you believe that you can do something, you do it well, you're going to be really committed and productive and effective. And you can be productive and effective from a place of insecurity, but what does it take to get there? The toll is different. So I think it's a protection from things like burnout as well. And I think as the team leader, it takes the pressure off you. So if you have somebody who is supported through maternity coaching, and that's where they can go with things like their insecurities or their questions, or working through like, gosh, I just don't feel the same in this team anymore. They get to work that out with the coach. And maybe then they come to you more with, can you help me with some feedback in this particular area? Because I feel like I need to know, am I doing a good job? Rather than being faced with the problem. So you're likely to have an employee that comes to you with solutions. So I think there's lots of different ways to look at what the benefit of maternity coaching is. And I don't think many employers really need convincing that it's a good thing. And when we talk about maternity coaching, actually, you could extend this to parental coaching, because I don't believe it's actually any different for people who are adopting, for example, or maybe even dads that take a primary carer role, or perhaps there's parents who have separated, and so one half of the family have taken on more of the caring duties. Like, there is maternity coaching, and then you can extend that broader as well into different responsibilities and caring and transitions that people have within their lives.
I think maternity coaching can be really valuable in enabling the coachee to be able to articulate what their needs are to the line manager or to peers. And of course, as you said, organizations will change. Key personnel might have changed in the organization while the person has been off. So there might be new relationships that need to be formed. And so being able to talk to a coach around like working out what your goals are, what does success look like for you returning to work in at the end of the first week, like rather than measuring yourself against everything you used to do, what does success look like for you just in this first week? It can really help you to kind of break things down into stuff that's more manageable and achievable and that can gradually build your confidence back up. And where you do feel that you want coaching can help you to identify where you might need a little bit more support and can help you then to figure out how do you want to go about achieving that support. You can role play conversations in coaching. That can be a good way to build your confidence to have those conversations, give you different perspectives on the scenario. So whilst you might be telling yourself, oh, I can't have a conversation with my boss about that because X, Y, and Z, the coach might be able to just help you explore that through different lenses and give you different approaches. So it can help you getting out of that kind of stuck absoluteness back into a little bit more flexible thinking and supporting yourself to have those reasonable expectations and knowing that somebody really understands the truth in your experience as you navigate that point in your life can be a huge support.
Mm. Yeah, I think we talked earlier on the podcast around some of the topics that might come up in
Mm.
maternity coaching. And again, reflecting back on my journey, I remember before I had children worrying that I would be seen as less talented when I had children. Now, some of that was mine, 100%, like just beliefs that I held. And I think some of it is the system. Because in reality, what happened for me after I had children, I become way more productive. So before I had children, I had loads of time to like stand and have a chat in the corridor and, catch someone for a coffee and just all the like an 8 hour day. There were lots of like slots within that where I was a bit more just loose with my time. When I had children, I actually became self-employed after. I didn't go back into the corporate world. I exited into this business. And we started, Joe, something like 5 hours of childcare a week. My gosh, what I could achieve in those 5 hours because I knew that there was no time for coffee, chats, a little slow stroll to, I don't know, the water cooler or whatever the equivalent may have been. I was so much more productive. And okay, I left the corporate world, but had I gone back into the corporate world, it would have been the same because I'd have wanted to leave on time and I wanted to get all of my work done so I didn't have to open the laptop in the evening or I didn't have to work weekends. I wanted to really contain my work to my work. And so systemically, I think what a coach is able to do in maternity coaching is try and help you to unpick what's yours, what's real, what's not real. What's the story you might be telling? What have you learned from a system? Is there a reality that now you're going back and you've requested part-time work and that you're going to get overlooked for promotion? Because it could be real. And then you have to work out, like, what does that mean? Are you okay with that because you've made a choice when you haven't really made a choice? Like you've just chosen to prioritize. So there's lots of different complexities from a systemic lens to explore and unpick as well, to work out how am I now in this new world? What makes sense for me and what doesn't make sense for me? And that I think can really help with the emotions that people experience in the workplace because there can be resentment. So if you put in for part-time working request and you don't get it, or you put it in, but then your colleague gets promoted when you've been there longer and you see that you're more skilled, and that may or may not happen. But maternity coaching can help to support with all the different things that are going on within the broader system, as well as the simple things like returning to work, getting set up, establishing your goals, exploring the emotions about how you feel about being a parent. So it's really a vast and expansive space, maternity coaching.
Yeah, and it also can be actually, some people are like, can't wait to get back to work. And actually, that's the sanctuary, and it can find parenting really difficult. And that might come up in the maternity coaching, like how difficult parenting feels in comparison to the day job, and then the emotions that are associated with that, whether you feel guilt, somebody might feel guilty about that, or they might feel excited or relieved by that, like any number of different feelings. And I think the point is that every single person's experience of being on maternity leave will be different. There'll be common themes that might come up and people might experience, but it is so different for every individual. And I've had two children, and my experience of maternity each time was very different. And that's because I was different. My circumstances were different. Different things had happened in that space in between having the children. And so what I would discuss in maternity coaching in each of those times would be largely different. And so I think with maternity coaching, what an organization is saying is, we care about you. We recognize that you are experiencing a big life transition, and there may not be the spaces in work to be able to support you in the way you might need to be supported during this time. But we would like to show you that we care about you as a person beyond being an employee in our organization. It's such a gift. And, not everybody would want to have maternity coaching. So even with all those benefits, it's not everybody would want to tap into it, but it's a really wonderful option if an organization is able to offer that to somebody.
Mm. I was just reflecting on calling it maternity coaching, because I'm sat here thinking around, well, let's take a senior leader that's transitioning to a CEO role. We don't call that CEO transitioning coaching, you know, and we don't label things. So in many ways, I think, I think as a coach, it's helpful to call yourself a maternity coach. I guess I'm throwing out the challenge of, like, really, it's just coaching. It's a transition. It's showing that you value this person who's talented, who happens to be coming back from maternity, but could be transitioning to a new role. It's normal to support people in those transitions, to get them set up for success, to help them refocus on the priorities and what's now important. And yes, there may be lots more emotions that come with that, but it's a normal thing to be able to offer because you value the talent within your organization. So I don't know why that thought came to mind, but it was just something that struck me as, like, oh yeah, why do we have to label it? Why does it have to be a thing? When wouldn't it be a great world to live in where it was just a matter of course of, like, yeah, we recognize this is an important transition and you're talented, and you have some coaching to help you navigate that transition.
And I'm in turn, I think, reflecting on our emotions coaching practitioner training. We attract a lot of coaches that work in the area of um, coaching parents, or maternity coaching, or relationship coaching, like family based stuff. Although all coaching, in our experience with clients, like family dynamics and things, are relevant and come into those conversations. I think these topics feel deeply emotive. They are deeply emotive for the individual. Because they are so important. They're milestones. This is a milestone in somebody's life. So it's a time when we naturally would seek support from other people. It's also a time when an individual might go in on themselves. And I've worked with people in the past, and know of people that actually, once they've had the baby, the labor hasn't gone as they thought. There have been surprises at the end of that. The um, the mum might go through a very difficult time in a way that wasn't predicted. They just weren't prepared for.
Mm.
And so having that additional support there can be really helpful. So if you're coaching somebody, knowing it's a really critical point in their life, and in maternity coaching, hormones are different, and so the coaches we see take that responsibility of partnering with somebody, through these transition periods in their life very, very seriously. And they want to be able to support their coachees with a deep, careful understanding of how to support people with their emotions, how to support them to develop their understanding of their emotions, help them to understand the different patterns they might have with their emotions, how to be able to navigate their emotions with more choice, more fluidity, without getting too stuck in particular emotions, without being overwhelmed by their emotions, or on the flip side, stonewalling their emotions, which can lead to problems later down the line. And in doing that, they also commit to doing that work themselves. And you can feel that from a coach, I believe. You can feel that if a coach has done or is doing that work themselves, because they show up differently. The conversations are different, but the presence is different. The tone of the conversation is very different.
Well, we had on our emotions coaching course this week, didn't we? We had, well, several coaches, but one sticks out to me. Someone shared openly that they have always known they could be doing more, asking more questions, like having a bigger impact, but something has held them back from asking the question that was on their mind or inviting that person to open up more. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was reluctance, like it doesn't matter what it was, but they knew they could do more but weren't able to or didn't feel equipped to. And they said, this program has been the thing I've been searching for years to help me to do this with my client. And I think in these spaces, we're here today talking about maternity coaching. I've worked with senior leaders who get to the top and they have a similar emotional crisis around, gosh, like I've built my entire career off of this one singular goal. And now I'm here. I'm like, what am I doing? And there's a real risk that the house of cards like falls down. And coaching, when you can work at it through an emotional lens, helps to rebuild that house of cards into such more solid foundation and help to make choices where, in my instance, many of those carry on and have a really reconnect with their passion and their experience of their career. So emotions coaching isn't just for emotive subjects. It really helps and we see people in it. But all coaching is emotions based. So well, we've kind of gone off track, but I think where we'll end is, if you're a coach and you see opportunities for opening up a deeper level of conversation, or you're just really curious around, gosh, how would I do that? And what do I want to learn in myself to be able to hold a really compassionate and courageous space with people? Do come and check out our Emotions Coaching Practitioner Training. You can find that on our website at igcompany.co.uk/emotions coaching.